I guess I'm a little early getting started.
Do we want to do that?
We've got a couple minutes. You ready to go, Dick? We're going to do a YouTube video of this presentation like we did last month. I think the people that did look in on it on YouTube were pretty happy that it was there because they couldn't make it to the meeting. Excuse me. I want to welcome you all today. In particular, we have one honored guest here, and her name is Mary May Swingler. She's sitting here in the front row, and she's part of the presentation today. Her name is there. And the second person I want to call out before I even get started here is Kay. Kay Ann Yarian Bonham. And she provided so much information to get me stirred up to do this. And just family memories, and she spent a lot of time working on this. Yeah, we got motorcycles today. So, I want to start off with a little bit of genealogy. It's 2:30.
Okay, I'm going to start.
It's going to get warm in here.
I know, but it's also
Not a lot you can do about that. Okay. Now we're going to start off with a little bit of genealogy. And I'm hoping that I've done some bit of this right. I am not a genealogist. We do have an expert here in the audience. Anyhow, I'm going to move to my first slide here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the May family in Springfield Township. The first gentleman and lady who ventured into Springfield Township that I know of was Jacob May and his wife Sophia. And they moved from Adams County, Pennsylvania, which is over near Gettysburg, in the early 1800s. Specific dates I don't have, but I would say prior to 1820. Mr. May and his wife are both buried at the Old Springfield Cemetery, which is over by what was called Twin Churches. It's between here and New Middletown on Route 170 at the intersection of Columbia and Newcastle Road, or Columbia Road as it's known today. They had 11 children, I think, from the records that I found. Anna Maria, her married name is Nagel. Anna Catherine, and her married name was Wirt. Barbara, and she was a Bauer. Margrethe, Jacob, Sarah, which is 40. Susanna Schellenberger, Elizabeth Kinney, Katharina, William, and Molly. Several of those children ended up staying in Springfield Township, according to what I could find. And the first one would be Barbara Maurer and Susan Schellenberger. Where's John? William. John should be on here somewhere. Anyway, I'm gonna move the next slide and it'll tell me. John May is one of those children. He married Catherine Miller. And going through this exercise here and looking through the genealogy, I determined that John May was my third great-grandfather. Again, John came from Adams County, Pennsylvania with his father, early 1800s. He's buried down at the Unity Brick Church Cemetery. This is on Route 14 at the intersection of Waterford Road. He had 8 children. Mary, married a Yarian. Susanna, married a Sittler. Jacob. Sophia, married a Flor. Catherine, another Yarian. Elizabeth, married a Hack. Rebecca, another Hack. And Hiram. Now, for you folks that are from Springfield Township, Hiram's son, so the last guy up there on the 8 children, one of his sons named Harvey had folks that lived around here, that lived in Springfield Township in our generation that we might have known. The first one on there, her name is Ada. She married my great uncle. His name was Roy Risen. Florence, Mildred, and Mahala were in town known as the May sisters. None of them married. They were school teachers, and they lived in a house that still sits on Garfield Road. The house is in between the Thompson Mining Company today and the Church of God. There's an old house sitting there, and that's where the daughters lived. That's where Harvey lived as well. Ray was also a school teacher, and Victor was a farmer around the area, and Everett May, his son was David, that had the Hummel shop down on Garfield Road. Everett made his money selling popcorn. Here we're going in, this is more into the family that's sitting in the first couple of rows here. This is the first William May, who married Margaret Warner. Again, they were from Adams County. Buried at Unity Brick Church Cemetery. 9 children: Israel, Sophia Heck, Eva Rupert, Elizabeth Heck, Catherine Harold, Barbara Rupert, Solomon, Elias, and Hiram. And we're going to move to one of these children. And his name was Israel. He married Rebecca Harold. They again married at Unity Brick Church Cemetery. He only had 2 children. He died at a very young age. I think he was 35 years old, 35, 36. William and Medina. And this William here, the child, is the guy we're going to spend a little time talking about. Here's William May. And this happens to be Mary's grandfather. He married Christina Celestia Gebhardt, my second great aunt. He's buried in New Springfield Lutheran Cemetery. There were 3 children: Iva, married in Ashland, Oscar, and Milton. And here's Milton May. He married Minnie Ola Peters. These folks are buried in Petersburg Cemetery. There were 4 children: Marjorie, Carl, Eloise, and Mary, who is in our front row here. Here's a map that I dug up, and this comes from 1860. I'm going to use my handy dandy May Chevrolet yardstick that I dug out of the closet at home this morning. I had a fancy laser pointer, but this is better. The May family settled just up to the east and south here's the town of New Springfield. This is Garfield Road, running east and west. This is Route 165 going toward Unity. Notice John May, William May, another May, and another May down here in the corner. So all of this area, all this whole section was owned by the Mays in 1860. Another important point here of this map, some of this, I want you were paying attention to the ladies who were married outside the May family. Does there Rupert sound familiar? Floor, Jack. There's a lot of neighbors got married. They didn't travel far to find a spouse. So like I say, that's what the map looked like back in 1860. That the area today is vastly different. I would say that 90% of that property, of all of those farms, has been strip mined. So it's all changed. Unfortunately. Unfortunately. Here's the guy that I'm going to spend a little time talking about. That's William. This is the fellow that was on the previous, one of the previous slides. This is William F. May. Now I'm going to have to look at my notes. And here's William's family. This picture was taken around 1896. In the picture, left to right, is Oscar May, William, the father, Milton May, Celestia, Mama, and Ida. Again, about 1896. One of William came to, William's father was Israel. He died when he was, when William was 5 years old, his father passed away. So he was raised by his grandparents and his mother. And he left home at 16 years old and came to New Springfield. And he kind of started out for himself working as a carpenter and as a molder in a foundry in New Springfield. He never had training in either trade. He caught on very quickly and became, eventually, by 1871, he was managing the foundry. And he later started a sawmill business and operated it until about 1896. So he was quite the kid. Around 1896, he founded the Star Basket Factory in New Springfield. He started off with a huge 40-foot by 45-foot building and expanded from there. Can't do that. There's one of the buildings of the Star Basket Factory. He started with a 40 by 45 building. He added a 30 by 100 foot building, and later another 30 by 40 building. In addition, he had storage sheds and 2 large storerooms where he kept 1.5 million baskets in stock. And all of his baskets were shipped by rail. He would take them they were taken with horse and buggy to Columbiana to the rail siding to ship them around the country. Initially, he produced pack in half bushel baskets and later quarts. Another picture of the basket factory with the logs waiting to be taken into the factory, and they would take the logs in there and soak them in hot water and cut them into thin strips. Now, here's the first evidence of another business that was right immediately in front of the basket factory, and that is their auto dealership. There's a little more of the basket factory with a stack of, usually they used a lot of poplar wood because it was soft and easy to work with. And easily bendable. Skipping the slides here. I'm not sure exactly where this slide fits into the sequence here, but not only did he offer baskets, they were selling poultry back then as well. So you could, from here, he was making coops. I mean, all sorts of things. We're going to see more about this. And this is obviously an advertising piece that was a picture taken by Web Photography in Columbiana of one of his star baskets with a little star on the side of it. One thing that I found in the information that Kay gathered up was an original 1907 brochure for the Star Basket Factory. This is the cover of it. It's hard to see, but step around here. It says here, makers of these strong ventilated berry baskets and crates. These crates are popular among the leading fruit growers of the country and highly recommended by best commission merchants. No order is too large for our capacity and not too small for our appreciation. So this is a real sales pitch. Read before you order. Order early. That sound familiar? Well, there's all sorts of testimonials that I'm not going to read. But here's showing some of the product line. A star quart. Not only is it a quart, it's a real quart. It isn't a skimpy quart like the other guys make. It's a full quart. And division racks to separate them when you stack them. Gift crates. You ever see one of these? A carrier. If you pick strawberries, you've seen a carrier before. Potato and apple crates. Tree protectors, etc. The terms, the price list in this catalog annuls all former issues. All agreements are contingent upon strikes, accidents, delays of carriers, and other delays beyond our control. Terms are cashed with order. As a grand and final windup, Don't let an offhanded, good-faith reverie of recklessness prompt an utter disregard of business principles and cause you to telephone to the hardware man who ended up a crate of baskets. Now, it might not fit your case anyway. Down at the bottom it says, a man's best school is experience. Next is observation. Success comes to men only when they are prepared for it. Procrastination is a thief of time. Okay, about the same time that he's operating the basket factory, he gets involved with setting up the new Springfield Creamery in 1903. And this is the creamery building. It is still sitting where it was built. It's right behind Welsh Motors, and it's the body shop. Or at least the end of the body shop. The body shop has been added on to, but that's a whole other story. But this is the original Springfield Creamery. Oh, by the way, at the same time that the basket factory was built and being operated, at the other end of town, there was another basket factory, the Reich Basket Factory. And that operated from about 1896, 97, up until the early 50s. I know my mom worked there. Here's the William May residence that was built in 1905, around 1905 to 1910. This is a few years after it was built because you can see the trees are already been pruned once. Here's a little nicer photograph of the house around, this is about 1915. And here's the whole family in front of the house. This one is also around 1915. And the car that's in there is an Overland. Because guess what he was selling at the garage across the street? Overlands. I believe, don't know this for a fact, but I believe that the Buick was his first car to be sold because Overlands weren't made when the garage opened. The garage opened in 1904 as May sales. I don't think Overland were in business until 1908 or 9, and they were only in business for a few years. But that business, it was the dealership that was opened in 1904, was the first auto dealership in Mahoning County. This is a picture of Milton. And this was a few years later, obviously. And this is a 1912 Overland Model 60. What a grand old car. And a grand old man. He was a young man at that time. And here is the entire family in that same car. William and his wife are in the back seat. I think looks like Milton is driving and Oscar is next to him. Probably Vinny next to Oscar. If you remember Vinnie Mae.
She went
Viola. Well,
her name was Minnie Rolo. She went Viola.
no, I'm talking about Oscar's wife.
That was
Vinny, yes. Well, yes, Ola was yes.
Right.
This is that same house in 2020. And it sure looks different without a front porch. And it needs a front porch, really, big time. But over the years, I've learned that after, there's a gap there, I'm not sure, but after Milton died, or after William died, I'm not positive, but did you guys live in this house?
No, I don't know where we're at. Dad built a new house, so I don't know. He
Okay.
built that house in the garage and Austin.
Okay,
And I wasn't living there. But my two boys, Marjorie and Carol, were living, and it worked pretty well.
yeah, okay,
So I never lived, I don't know where. I think I lived in the house beside them.
okay. Oh, in later years, this house, all I can do is get date forward to the 60s, because I delivered the newspapers in town. And I delivered newspapers to this house, but I delivered to a lady by the name of Miss Wilson. And that's all I knew her by. And I rarely saw her.
Yeah.
She would put her money in an envelope and pay me at the door. So she never came to the door to pay me. The papers went in the door every day. And I did some research about her and found out that she was actually running a little bitty, kind of a mini nursing home at the time. She was taking care of old folks, boarders, and she was a nurse. And matter of fact, I talked to people that lived next door, one of the daughters, and she said she used to go and visit Miss Wilson. Her name was Esther Wilson. Okay, but now look at the first photo that I have found, or that we found, found. This is the first photo of the May Sales Company building from the front side. And you can see the basket factory to the rear. Over here. The car that's sticking out the door there is a 1916 Buick. And if you notice to the left side of the picture, there's a contraption there that was used to fill up gas tanks. It was a 5-gallon gravity-fed dispenser for gasoline. Here's a couple of years later. This is around 1918. And there's some interesting things going on in this photo. Again, here's the gravity-fed gas dispenser over here to the left. The car to the left is a 1918 Buick model E85, or E35. The one sticking out of the building is a model E45. And that's Milton May that's opening the door of that car. The one to the right is a 1915 Buick model C45. Now there's a guy standing there holding 2 tires. And what he's trying to illustrate, or what he's illustrating, is the difference between 31-inch tires, which were used on the 4-cylinder cars, and 36-inch tires, which were used on the 6-cylinders. 36-inch tires were a big deal. They'd get you through the ruts and the mud back in those days. The left of the photo, that's a Gilbert and Barker T8 gas pump, which was an upgrade to the previous 55-gallon drum with a spigot that was used for dispensing gas. Here's a little glimpse inside the shop in 1918. A lot of tires in stock up there on the rack. I don't think tires were too good back then. Here's another shot. This is about 1921. Again, you can see a little bit of the basket factory in the background to the right, and a truck parked there. Now listen, we've got another advancement here, which is the gas pump. You can see there, right here. Right in the center, it has a red crown logo on it, which was Standard Oil Company back in the day. So that was a little different arrangement. And now I'm going to introduce you to a gentleman by the name of Morgan, who's also known as Paul Rupert. This photo was in front of the May Buick Chevrolet business. This was taken around 1932. And that was a little race car that Paul had built at the time. Let's say a little bit about Paul. He was an interesting guy. Paul went into service in 42. He volunteered for the service in 1942. And his campaigns took him to Normandy, northern France, Rhineland, and Central Europe. He flew air offensives in Europe while in the 597th Bomb Squadron. He earned a Bronze Star, an Aim Theater Ribbon, Good Conduct Ribbon, and an Honorable Discharge in 45 as a staff sergeant. When he got home, he stepped up and helped raise his brother's family. His brother Clarence died early. He was in an automobile wreck, just not too far from home, just at Springfield Road and 165. But Paul was just an excellent mechanic. He worked at May Chevrolet, at least in 1932, and I know he was there when it closed in 68. He enjoyed bowling, and he always had a sense of humor. And pranks, you gotta watch out. And he's most remembered for his ability to fabricate and fix stuff. Just stuff that he passed on to as many people as he could. He was a good teacher. He was a very good teacher. Now, and then there was a devastating fire in 1937. And in 1937, all the businesses that I've shown you burned to the ground. The basket factory, the old May auto business, everything. And it may have included the house that you referred to, Mary. No, not at the same time. Okay. But all that stuff, everything was leveled in 1937. This photograph was taken 38. Well, I have an excerpt. This came from the Progressive Dealer, which was a trade magazine from April 1939. They were talking about Milton May here. Years of experience enabled him to plan and build a superstation and garage that is unusual. Every section is planned so that it's easy to keep clean, well lighted, and handy for the man working on that particular job. Modern equipment was installed throughout. Cold water was piped for drinking fountains, and ultra-modern toilets installed. An automatic heating plant maintains even cold temperature. So this particular photo was taken in 38. There are two 1937 Chevys in the showroom, and you can see in the reflection on the glass, you can see some new Ohio gas pumps, the more modern two-time gas pumps that are reflected in the window. Can't see them, but they're there. And that's Milton standing in front of the door.
John, a story that Mom told me when the garage was, all the records were burnt, and people from the town came the next day and said, I owe you this much, I owe you this much. They respected them.
Is that right? Wow. The comment was that after the building burned, that people that were there in town that owed money came and paid him the money that they owed him. Because all the records were burned. This picture is from their first open house in 1938. And this is the showroom, which is crowded with people. It is claimed that nearly 4,500 people attended the open house that day. And I'm going to run through a real quick list of names. Some of these will be familiar to you. Wally Hack, and these people are in the pictures. And I've got one photograph that has numbers on the people corresponding with the list that I have here. Wally Hack, Troy Backlund, Raymond Cope, Red Esterly, Ernest Wilhelm, Walter and Mrs. Troyer, Ura and Mrs. Troyer, Perry Welker, Beefy Holland, Elba Wilhelm, Miriam Krumloff, Marie Sabers, Lamar Zwingler. He's there somewhere. Margaret Metz, Vera Shealy, Ralph Stewart, Alvin Rice, George Cyrus, Ralph Yeoman, Calvin Edler, Carl Sabers, Rena Heber, Vera Schaefer, Ora Yerian, Oliver Ash, Raymond Yerian, James Zwingler, Irene Kagash, Herman Welsh, Dawn Pollan, Lucille Pollan, Esther Sidler, Elizabeth Lively, Eloise May, Nyla Felger, William Felger, Wilbert Felger, Betty Pollan, Raymond Martin, Mrs. H.O. Brown, Ora Lip Yerian, Gloria Lawler, that was Mrs. Schwartz, Alvin Denton, yeah, I think I saw him before. S. Milton Cobb, we'll talk about him in a minute. Paul Shorty Seidner, Harry Wetzel, Harry Bacon, and Grace Heck, Carrie and Roy. That's a picture of the showroom. That's the shop. Complete with band.
Wow.
You see the folks in the front have instruments. What a party.
John, what year was that again?
1938. 1938. And I can tell you Ray Yerian is on the back wall.
I went to school here at Bayside, and they had the stage and the water on milk cans, and they
Milton there, wait a minute. Back up. This is Milton May. This picture was, I think in 1944. No, this is around 1940. Okay, this was the annual Chevrolet May Day, Friday, September 24th. Wait a minute, it's May, but it's September. That was the day the new cars came out. So this was an invitation that was sent out to folks announcing the new models are coming out.
I remember going over there, and they had a new car, and they was trying to do something, and they ran it up for a shopping door.
Oh, okay. All right, here's an interesting photo. Some people that some of you might know. This, I think, was taken around 1941, and left to right on here is Raymond Wetzel, Harry Wetzel, father, son. Son is on the corner, on the end. The next guy is Mr. Rupert, Paul Rupert, Carl Milton, and Raymond Yarian. That's obviously in the shop. And here is Ola, or Mini Ola May, at the front desk. I remember there was always candy bars for sale on the front counter. And cold pop in the dispenser. Okay, here's another, this is May Buick Chevy, taken around 1942. Notice that now we have a Chevrolet logo or bow tie up on the roof. We got new gas pumps out front with lights above them. And here we've got a 41 Chevy half-ton truck in the showroom, also a 41 Chevy sedan. The cars that are on the right-hand side there are 41 Buick, 37 Olds, 38 Olds, and a 37 Chevy. You hadn't no guess that I was a car guy. Here's a picture in 1944. Pretty bad, but that's the only one I could find for around that year. But we're showing the front of the dealership. This kind of hits me. I have a tough time reading through this. This is an open letter that was in the Columbiana Ledger, and it was done on March 31st, 1944. This is an open letter to the parents of any sons and daughters in the service. And this was penned by Mr. May, Milton May. And he has been sending, at that point in time, he had been sending newspapers to all of the servicemen in service around the world. And he's begging for everyone's cooperation in providing addresses, names and addresses of your loved one if they're overseas, so we can send them the newspaper. Okay, the next in the sequence, I'm kind of trying to go in sequence here. It has nothing to do with the photo, but Mr. May passed away in 1947. Milton May died in 47. And his wife, Ola, maintained ownership of the business until she passed in 1967.
I'd like to make a correction there. Raymond, Mary, and Kay's dad, and mom together owned the building.
Together, okay.
General Motors wouldn't give it to mom alone, nor to Raymond alone.
Okay, okay. Okay, I stand corrected. Thank you.
John, what was said?
Okay, she corrected me to say that Ola did not own the business. It was jointly owned by Raymond and Ola. General Motors wouldn't allow it to be owned by one person. Okay, this photograph was taken in 1951, and at this point, we have a new addition on the side of the building. The first of two additions. So it might be in the yardstick. From this point, this way, was all added in between 51 and the previous photo. Here is the man. Here's Paul Rupert in May 1951, working on a school bus. And here's Paul sitting on the bumper of a 51 Chevy. Okay, this photograph was taken in 51, 52. I think it was a big winter that winter. And the house that's present there is Oscar May's house, which is right next door to the May Chevrolet garage. Here's a gentleman I could not find who, I don't know who this is, but he's deep into working on the car or a truck at May Chevrolet. Here is Raymond. Here's Robert Fowl. I think the interesting thing about this photograph is what he's doing to the car. He's actually working, he's got half the car torn apart, got the roof taken off of it. Let me tell you what, today if your car needed that kind of repair, you know what they would do with it? They would junk it. Back then, everything was worked on. It was rebuilt. There were, I can't tell you how many starters and generators I rebuilt when I worked there. Today, you throw it away and get a new one. There's our star. This gentleman sitting here in the front row. That's Luke Bilas in 1954. Right here. Say, you were still in high school then, right, Luke?
Started in sophomore year.
You started working there in your sophomore year.
Yeah.
Here's another interesting photo. And this is July 1958. And you can see there's actually two additions to the building. This is the original building. This is the first addition, and that's the second addition. The interesting thing is on the roof. It says New Springfield. It's got a funny looking symbol. Well, what that symbol is, it's telling airplane pilots that it's 5 miles to the nearest airport. It's pointing the way. This is part of navigating with an airplane back in the day, and it's pointing to Elsers Airport over near North Lyon, excuse me. It's over on Sherritt Road. 1959. Still got a 58 Chevy sitting out front. We're at Ohio gas station now. Look at that. This is in 1960. In the snowy year of 66. Okay, this is about the time that yours truly began working at the garage. I started working there sometime in 1966, and I worked there until the business closed in 68. It was there for the auction. And here's the fellow that was my boss. And he ran that business from 1947 to 1968. And once Ola passed, she died in late 67. And by 1968, we were preparing for an auction. So, and there is the building as it is today. It is currently being used as a storage facility, and immediately behind it you can see that there are storage units. Guess who owns it? Mr. Biles sitting right here. And I do want to thank you, Kay Ann. Number one, I want to thank Jane Grimm Rupert, who isn't here today, I don't believe. But Jane provided me with a few of those photographs. I used Family Search for some of the genealogy stuff. And I got to mention Dick Bay back here, who I chatted with. Also, the 20th Century History, Youngstown and Mahoning County, Sanderson's 1907, had a lot of information, particularly about William May. So, thank you, and I want to thank all of you for coming out today and putting up with the heat and putting up with my BS.